Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Today, we have a member spotlight. So please welcome Grace to the show. Grace, thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you
And
for
where,
having me.
of course. So where
Yeah.
are you joining us from?
From Edmond, Oklahoma, just north of Oklahoma City.
Okay, good. And I know I have quite a few other ladies actually from Oklahoma. So they'll probably be a little bit more familiar with exactly where you are than I would being on the East Coast. So why don't you tell the ladies a little bit about yourself and kind of just who you are, if you can.
Okay. Well, I was raised in the lovely, beautiful state of Washington. I'm from Vancouver, Washington, and I was homeschooled K through 12. Graduated at 17 and moved to Oklahoma to go to Oklahoma Christian University. And I met my first boyfriend and married him halfway through school and wound up staying here. So he's a Kansan and I said no to Kansas. So so we stayed in Oklahoma.
What made you draw the line on Kansas?
That is a great question. I mean, the Midwest is the Midwest, but he's from Wichita, and Wichita is, for all the Wichita people out there, I apologize, but it is more boring than Oklahoma City. So,
that's where your line was.
Made improvements in the last 15 years. So, just saying. But anyway, that's kind of how I got here and stayed here. We found a wonderful church home, and that's really what kept us here.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Good.
Then I'm not entirely sure what else. I'm trying to remember what else we need to talk about there, but that's
okay.
Yeah. Oh, I majored in accounting, so I am a CPA now. I got my permit to practice in 2013. So just a few years after I graduated from college, and I've been in public accounting since then. I worked at a firm for a while and then had kids, became a stay-at-home mom, and now I have my own practice where I help people with their QuickBooks and bookkeeping needs. I do not do tax returns. Don't ask me. I don't even prepare my own. So it's a great life.
No, and absolutely. One of the questions that I do want to ask is we're going to dive a little bit into the accounting part in a couple minutes, because that is one of the reasons you are always my go-to lady. You know, I tag you every time someone has like an accounting question or bookkeeping question. I'm like, I don't know, ask Grace. So I appreciate that I have you there, that I know you can help with those questions. But yes, taxes are a completely different thing and not necessarily, once again, what every CPA focuses on. You have a very cool, fun fact that I love about you. Would you be willing to share that with the rest of the crew here?
Sure. Yeah. So our senior year of college, my husband got wind that Disney World does auditions so that you can go do their college program and be a performer if you get picked. And so I was like, really? I was very career minded, going to be a CPA, very serious. And he talked me into auditioning with him. So we drove down to Dallas, auditioned. It was a lot of fun. And he wound up getting to be a character performer, and they still hired me on to be a costumer. So right after graduation, I didn't go work at a big four firm. I went and worked at Disney World as a costumer underneath the Cinderella Castle in Magic Kingdom. So I worked, so I dressed performers, organized their costumes, did a lot of laundry. So
really, I didn't realize that would be a part of that job profession. I thought that would be.
Well, they do have their own dry cleaning facility. So it's really more, the performers drop off all their sweaty, nasty, because it's Florida, all their stuff.
Yeah.
We sort through it and then ship it out to dry cleaning. So that was probably about 50% of the job was sorting dirty laundry. Yeah.
And how many years did you do that for?
I only did it for 7 months.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it made me realize that I wanted to be an accountant.
Reminded you of that.
Reminded me. I already knew, but no, it was a fantastic experience getting to see behind the scenes at Disney. And of course, my husband was a performer, and he got to be best friends with Goofy for the majority of the time we were there. He had several other characters that he worked with as well, but that was his main one. He got to work all over all 4 parks, a few resorts, and it was fun. So, but yeah, Disney is a fantastic case study. If you want to learn anything about business, going and just working for them, even at the minimum
Even doing
wage
laundry.
level, doing laundry, like phenomenal training. Like they do what they do very, very well.
I
So
feel like
anyway,
some of those larger companies like Disney or you always hear about like, McDonald's University, right? Clown University,
yes,
whatever it's called. That like
yes,
some of those things are out there and kind of put in a very organized, structured, and they do business in a
yes,
very organized sense, and definitely something to kind of learn from. Well, cool. I'm
yep.
glad that you had this totally random experience. I'm sure looking back, you're like, you know what? I'm really glad I went and kind of did something else for a few
Oh
months kind of before
yes.
starting like adult life, right?
I
So
wouldn't
I
change
think
it.
that
I
was a good
wouldn't
plan.
work there again, but I wouldn't change that I did.
Totally understandable. I lived abroad for many years, kind of same thing in my
Yes.
20s.
Yeah.
And, I had owned a company abroad, and I then lost my company abroad, lost tons of money, and had to move back to the States and kind of start over. And people say that to me all the time, like, oh, you must regret that. And I'm like, no, it
No,
was one of the
you
best
learned so
experiences of my life.
much.
I learned a
Yeah.
ton. So how
Yeah.
did we go from being goofy and a customer to getting back to Oklahoma and now investing in real estate?
Well, we decided we didn't want to stay at Disney World because the entertainer schedule, we never saw each other.
Okay.
Because yeah, it was just a mess. We didn't have a church family there because we were always
Okay.
scheduled on weekends because we worked in entertainment.
Makes
And
sense.
yeah, so we decided to move back to Oklahoma, where our church home is, and also where I had all my credit hours and I was set up to become certified as a CPA. So
hmm
I already had a few steps there for Oklahoma, not for other states. So that's why we came back.
Okay.
And yeah, so we moved back. My husband got his MBA here. I wound up working at a firm for a few years, got my certification,
hmm
followed my plan that I had had since I was about 5 years old. So
Now, what 5-year-old says that they want to be a CPA?
well, it was really more like I would take, my mom would always have any cash that we had saved or whatever, and she had a little cash box. And I
Yeah.
would always ask to take my money out and just sit and count it. And I would make sure all the bills were all the same,
Yeah.
facing the same way. And
Oh,
I'd count
wow.
my money and organize it and then think about all the things that I could buy with it. I never spent it. I just would count it. And then I'd put it
Oh,
back in the
wow.
box and then go about my merry way. But so my parents always told me, you're going to be an accountant. Yeah, you're going to be an accountant, which I had other like, I've always been into music. So I thought, well, maybe I'll be a pianist or maybe I'll go be in ballet. But really, it's always been accounting. I'm just
And
weird,
here
I
we are.
guess. So yeah, here we are. So yeah, which I'm not your typical accountant anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate
Which fits
taxes.
which
Yeah.
fits the theme of always kind of doing some, even in being in
Yeah.
accounting, but still kind of doing it in your own way. So that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes. So anyway, so I originally was going to go get my CPA and do tax returns. That was my original
hmm
plan until I took a tax course in college and realized that was not going to be for me. So so I explored a few different avenues that you can do as a CPA and
hmm
wound up just really falling in love with QuickBooks and
Huh.
decided that if I could carve out a niche where all I did was help small business owners, entrepreneurs
hmm
with their accounting software and training them in how to do their books and
Yeah.
helping boost their confidence, then that's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I do now. That's all I do. And it's awesome. So I get to be their cheerleader.
Which I'm
And
sure you're fantastic at. I'm sure that you're the right person, especially because it's a great way to be able to make something a little more fun that most people think of as kind of more of a dry topic. So you kind
yes.
of need
Yeah.
somebody that's going to make it interesting to kind of go through. Now, are there certain industries that you work with within QuickBooks?
Well, I mean, several. I
Yeah.
really like service industry mainly
Okay.
because the people who start a service business are
hmm
your startup entrepreneurs who want to go and do and get paid for it. Yep. And the people who do that know nothing about accounting, nothing. And I love the education aspect of it. I love training people and helping them realize that they are not dumb. Really, that's my number one job, is helping people realize that they're not dumb. They just haven't had an education in accounting. And I can provide just what they need so that they can go and shoot for the moon. So really, I like service industry mostly. So I do like real estate. Obviously, I do my own books for my real estate investments. And then I've got another client, and then I answer questions, for people asking various things. But
all day long in the Lady Landlords Facebook group, you're sitting there, you're answering questions about QuickBooks. What would you say for real estate investing, for doing their books? Where do you think a lot of those investors get stuck? Where do you think that they maybe don't know kind of what process there is? Is it just something that's completely foreign to us that we just avoid it? Or is it really kind of putting that system in place? What questions do you feel like you probably see in the group most often to help with?
Really, the problem that I see the most, which it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, it's folks, and I know you've done this too, is folks wanting to keep their books in Excel.
Yep.
When they when you have one property, it's not a big deal. Like, you can do that. It's pretty easy. But then when you start adding properties, it can get complicated. And then when you start, if you have multiple businesses going on, that gets things complicated. And if you're a person with anything else going on in your tax life, which is, your whole life, then everybody, then that just brings in so much more complexity. If you can have it in a platform that is designed to be more powerful and to be able to handle all of that and present the information back to you in a meaningful way, it's just so much easier, and your accountant will like you.
And so is that like is QuickBooks the preferred service for your accountant when you do go to get your taxes done? Like, do they like to see, like, would my accountant be much happier if I send her QuickBooks rather than all my Excel files? Is that what you're trying to tell me, Grace?
Okay, honestly, it does depend on the accountant. I will be honest there. Different accountants have different softwares that they like. QuickBooks, Intuit really has a huge, like, I'd say corner of the market, but really it's like, world. they have a huge pull on the market, and they know their stuff. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a very long time, and they have different types of products depending on what you need. So it's very common for accountants to use QuickBooks. Now there's Xero, there's Wave, there's all the other free ones. But
I've never heard of.
Oh, okay.
I've never heard of those companies or those options. I feel so that's actually really cool to know that there are other options out there. Probably not as great, especially since you did mention free. But I think
you get what you pay for with accounting software. You really do.
Kind of anything, usually anything that's kind of going to have that paid service, there's usually a reason that it's going to cost something, because there's going to probably be a better quality to it than if it was the free version. But that is interesting to know that after QuickBooks, the next kind of options are ones that I've never even heard of. So that's really, that shows you just how big QuickBooks really is and how widely accepted it is then. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's probably number one. Number two is folks that go, okay, I'm going to go in accounting software and it's going to be awesome. And I'm going to do all this self-training and watch all the YouTube videos and it's going to be great. That can be a good thing. But if you do not have the know-how of an accountant, because accounting is its own language. Accounting 101, double entry accounting is its own language. And if you don't understand double entry accounting, running your own accounting software without knowing that, it can be done. It can also be done very poorly. I've seen both from people who don't know accounting. So that is a risk you're taking there. because what makes sense in the accounting world may not make any sense to you, and what may make sense to you makes no sense in the accounting world. So,
and I think all of our listeners, would completely agree. One of the reasons that we usually pay accountants is because it is a completely different language, right? There are
yes.
just different forms that need to be filled out, and there's questions that are asked. I mean, I think most of us, if you've ever had a W-2 job, when they give you that form to fill out and you're like, wait, like, am I supposed to put a 0 or a 1? Like, what? If you're already lost by
still don't know how to fill that form out.
Exactly. But like, those are things that like already within that, like it's already setting you
Yes.
kind of up for like, there are people that are professionals for that are experts that understand what you're supposed to do in those situations. And sometimes we have to use those experts. Now, you had mentioned double entry accounting.
Yes.
What is that?
Okay. Are you familiar with the terms debits and credits?
Yes. That I know.
Okay. That is double entry. In a nutshell, that is double
Uh-huh.
entry accounting. Debit
Okay.
means left. Credit
Yep.
means right. That's all it is. And it's an equation. So, in algebra, back in high school, when you have an equation,
forever ago,
both sides have to be equal. And so for every transaction, there's an entry on one side of the equation and an entry on the other side of the equation. For example, if you buy something, your cash goes down.
Yes.
But your expenses go up. Your expenses go up. But in order for the equation to work, one of them is debited and one of them is credited. So for every entry, there is a debit and there is a credit. So knowing which account on your chart of accounts to use for that debit and credit for every transaction is where accounting comes in. So fun fact, the guy that came up with this system was named Luca Pacioli a few hundred years ago.
I am so glad that I learned that today, because I don't know how I made it through my 37 years without knowing the name of the person. I don't know how. I
Luca
don't know
Pacioli. Don't
how
forget
have
it.
I've been able to sleep at night with
there will be a test.
See, when you said double entry, the only thing that popped into my mind was actually, do you remember when people used to use checkbooks and like registers?
That's exactly what that is.
And we always learn, we actually had probably the only class in finance. We always talk about how you never learn finance, accounting, any of those things back in like high school, middle school. I had one like home ec class where they taught us about how to balance your checkbook. And I remember them being like, well, you could do a single line entry or a double line entry. And I remember, and that when you said that, it brought me back to like 6th grade home ec, where I was like, oh, maybe she's talking about checkbook registers, which
that
are like totally.
That actually is double entry accounting. Yeah, because on one line you put when it went down in your cash, and then on the second line you put what you spent it on.
Yes, exactly. Okay, perfect.
That's exactly what that is.
That's so cool that like I'm glad. See, now my middle school was not a complete farce. I learned something.
You learned
when
accounting.
I was there. I learned that one class, right? We always talk about how, educational resources, things that they don't teach us about. They don't teach you how to do your taxes. They don't teach us, any type of bookkeeping. We don't talk about real estate investing or any investing, at least not where I went to school.
Yeah, no.
It was that one home ec class for that 35 minutes, whatever it was. We learned about balancing a checkbook, which once again, who balances checkbooks these days?
Yeah, no.
Probably exactly. Like that's not, this is why now we have QuickBooks to do these things. So how does your day job now kind of mesh together with real estate investing?
Okay. Well, I don't have to pay a bookkeeper, which is really nice.
That is very nice. Yes.
Yeah. I have to do it all myself, but it's kind of like my treat at the end of the day. Ooh,
but
I
you
get to
like
go do my books. Yeah, I like it. So now that's actually kind of what got me into real estate in a weird way. Because a few years ago, what really got me into real estate was my husband has never liked trading time for money. We read The Richest Man in Babylon back in college, and he's always complained, I don't like doing this. This is not fun. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to work and do my job. You sit here and think about that. Whatever.
Which is also interesting for an entertainer to say that, because I feel like being an entertainer is the epitome of trading time for money. But okay, but we'll leave that irony for him to sit with.
So Anyway, so he convinced me to buy our first property. We paid retail, and I was like, this is your thing. I'm not doing anything with this except the bookkeeping. I'm not like you. Yeah, I will handle the bookkeeping and make sure that all the compliance is met, but you're going to do all the investing. I don't care. Don't talk to me.
So he was to find the property, do the deal analysis, figure out what type of property you were going to buy, figure out how to manage it. All of that's all on him. So to start.
So we bought a house at retail. We bought it using money from my grandmother's trust and money from us and money from my parents. So we used all of our own money basically to buy this.
Yeah.
And then we rented it out. It was fine. Worked great.
Okay.
Great tenants. It was fine. And then several months later, I was working to grow my accounting practice. So I was going to networking events like crazy, talking to people about QuickBooks and this and that. And everybody wanted to talk to me because, ooh, she's an accountant. And well, I went to this one entrepreneur group in Oklahoma City, and the guy that runs it, Ron Harris, Angelina Harris, his wife, is in the group. Okay. And she actually invited me. He's a mentor to real estate investors and entrepreneurs. And they're very well established in this area as real estate investors and all of that. And he was asking me if I wanted to chat with him about helping his mentees with bookkeeping and maybe teaching them or something.
Oh, that's a great fit.
Great.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. I'd love to do that. So we went to coffee and we were talking about taxes and bookkeeping. Turns out he knew way more than I did about the tax side of investing.
Okay.
And I was just like, whoa, boy, you know more than I do. I think you're good. I don't think you need me. And he wound up telling me about how you can buy houses for free. I was like, what? This is too good to be true. I'm a realist. This doesn't happen. We just bought a house. This doesn't happen. And so he explained to me how basically the Burr method, or rinse and repeat, whatever you want to call it. And he explained that to me and it made sense. And I was like, oh, this guy's got a point. So I went home and I said, Tim, my husband, I said, Tim, I just met this guy. We need to do this. This is cool. The math works. Yeah. It's cool. So then we signed up with them. They have a coaching course that we went through. It was like a 6-month long deal teaching all about real estate investing. And we started going to the Real Estate Investor Association meetings and started ramping up. And since really then we've used, really into it. So since then we started, farming and doing all this stuff, and bought one off a wholesaler and sent out yellow letters and got another one. So we got really on fire for that. So that's how that transitioned into me being a real estate investor, is I was going to go help this guy with accounting, and he converted me to being a real estate investor.
And so now, when you went home and said to your husband, like, hey, I heard about this method, this guy told me about it, I think we should do this. Was your husband like, I'm glad you're on board? Was he like excited and was like, oh, it only took somebody else to tell you that we should do this?
That's exactly what he said. He looked at me and said, Grace, I've been saying that for years. That's what I'm talking about when I say I don't want to trade time for money. I know there's a way to do it and other people do it. I just didn't know how to do it. I was like, well, you're welcome for bringing it to you on a silver platter.
Exactly. You actually were the one then that solved the problem. It's interesting because you hear about that a lot, where sometimes like both partners in a relationship, one team seems to be a little bit more on board than the other one, and they kind of have a struggle of getting the other person on board. And sometimes, like, I do recommend to people, like, you almost need like that third party to kind of to have that conversation. We all learn different ways, right? Some people are listening to this on a podcast because they're more auditory. There's other people that are going to be watching this on YouTube because they like that visual. We all learn in different ways. We all kind of understand things in different ways. And sometimes, and also for those of you that maybe have gone through a recent quarantine with your partner, sometimes you just need a different sound of a voice to explain something rather than your actual partner. I had a similar situation one day. My husband was a bartender pre-COVID. when you were allowed to go to bars. And he came home one night with like on a cocktail napkin. Literally somebody had written out the Burr method on that cocktail napkin for him and was like, oh, like, and he, same thing. My husband came home and was like, hey, look at this, like amazing, like method. Like, this is such a great strategy. Like, we should try this. And I said the exact same thing. I was just like, I've been telling you this for years.
Yeah.
And then he was like, no. He goes, sit down. Let me walk you through what the B stands for. And I was like, babe,
I got it.
No. But once again, he needed to hear it from somebody else.
Yes.
He needed to understand it in different words or language. Clearly, how I was explaining it didn't necessarily work. And sometimes it just isn't the right time for somebody to accept something. So I'm sure once again, he was thrilled. And it sounds like you guys really hit the ground running, kind of moving forward with that plan, didn't you?
Yeah, we'll try to. Yes.
So what happened? I know you've kind of mentioned, you know, some deals have, and they always do, right? There's no cookie cutter deal. None of us have the exact same experience with it. So how did kind of those different deals go for you?
Okay. Well, our first, like, we started meeting and greeting wholesalers and going to Oklahoma City is very, very in-person friendly. Like, if you go to stuff, things will fall out of the sky. Like, you offer to go to take someone out to coffee and they'll pay for you. Like, it's just a very friendly atmosphere. People are always wanting to teach and learn from each other. It is a fantastic place to be a business owner and an investor. It's just how it is here, which has been great for us because it made it so much easier to learn. Because I could take, I mean, it didn't matter who they are. I could take the president of some whatever big shot company and they'd be like, oh yeah, sure, and then pay for me. So that's how
and then
it
buy
is.
you the cup of coffee.
Yeah, pretty much. Then buy me the cup of coffee. So that's actually happened to me. So, but anyway, so while we were doing that, we were raking in deals, analyzing and everything. Tim found one. We got it. It was a light rehab, mostly just cosmetic. And we were able to do it. But then, and I was in charge of getting banking lined up, funding and all of that. And we were going to do the bank loan route because that just seemed, I mean, we were able to, we've always had decent credit scores. I had my parents in partnership with us. So we had all the, you know, guarantees and everything. Yeah. So it wasn't a big deal to go to a bank for us. And, but then I didn't pay super close attention when we signed up for the loan that they would only cover up to 90% of cost or up to 80% of ARV, whichever was less. So we were stuck. Yes. So whichever it was. So we were still stuck with having to leave cash in the deal. And I didn't realize that until we went and refinanced. And we're like, yay, we got it. We're doing it. And they're like, oh yeah, here's your check. And it's like, that's not, we're missing some. Yeah, we're missing some. Aren't you guys covering all of this? Oh, no. You need to go back and read your loan agreement. I was like, oh, so read your loan agreement. Read the fine print.
There you go. That is our number one tip for the day. Read your loan agreement.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the first one. And then another one, we had a contractor rip us off and disappear. And he had $5,000 of our money. Wow. And so, but it was right after COVID hit. So it was like I'm going to take this guy to court.
And where maybe seeing a court in 2023.
Yeah, exactly. So we lost. Unresolved. Yeah. We just let it go, and we're just moving on. Not talking to him again. So anyhow, pretty much. So I think we wound up having to leave about $7,000 in that one, which in the grand scheme of things isn't all that bad. But I still wasn't expecting to, but that's part of it sometimes.
But once again, so with the 7,000 that was left in the deal, the 5,000 was because of the contractor. So there's only really 2 left outside of that, correct?
Yeah, that was just like unanticipated costs that were due to the contractor not finishing his job. And so we had to pay someone else, having to round up every time you switch contractors. Just
that
the
there's also
beauty of
depending on the
dealing with,
time.
yes, the beauty of dealing with contractors.
Exactly. And we were talking, actually, there was a big conversation about
I
contractors in
saw
the Lady
that.
Landlords Facebook group yesterday. And that is always something that, so if you couldn't tell, I'm in the Dominican Republic right now. My husband and I have been
Really?
looking at, I know, this is not a fake background, I know. So we've been looking at some properties down here, and there are opportunities for new construction. We've actually bought new construction in the Dominican Republic in the past. And so it was something that, we're not opposed to doing down here. But when we were going and looking at one of these properties, they were like, oh yeah, don't worry. By the end of 2021, properties will be open right in time for the high season for January 2022. And I was just like, well, like, when do you actually expect like the work to be done? And they were like, no, we expect it'll be done like in December. And I was like, great. So where is that leeway? Because it's going to take longer than you say. Also, being on an island, where you have to really import a lot of materials, where there's just different kind of conditions that even make it a little more difficult than in, the United States
Right.
necessarily. But no matter where you go, I think that's like one universal thing. Contractors will always be over budget and over on your
Overtime.
So,
Yep.
So I think there's nothing you can kind of do to get around those two, regardless of what country, language, or, location in the world you are. So that definitely makes sense, because now not only having to go find a new contractor, you might have also had like carrying costs, right? You might have had that property for an extra month, which is now extra taxes, extra bills in that sense as well. In addition to, well, now the person, that contractor charged $5,000, maybe the next guy, the best you can find is $6,000, right? So now there's an extra little money there. Can we go back to the first deal for a minute? So I want to make sure to get the numbers clear, just to kind of share your experience with that, just so the other ladies listening can make sure they understand what you're meaning by left money in that deal, right? So what we're talking about here is that BRRRR strategy, right? So you buy that property, you rehab it, and you refinance out of it, right? And that's where the refinance part is where you're supposed to be able to kind of pull your cash out.
Yes.
So you said that you use the bank, which I love. I think that people, sometimes we make this more difficult than it seems. We're always like, oh, I need to go find a private money lender or a hard money lender. And honestly, if you can use a traditional bank, use a traditional bank. We don't need to overcomplicate things. So I love the fact that you were like, this made sense for me. Path of least resistance here, that made sense. So you went through that bank, you bought the property, then you rehabbed it. And then did you go through the same bank to do the refinance?
Okay. How we have our system set up with this particular bank is so the first house that we bought with all cash and the loan from my grandmother, her loan is not backed by the property. It's just a loan. It's not a mortgage.
Okay.
So we were able to put a line of credit against that house. And so we have a line of credit that we use as cash to acquire properties through this bank. And
fantastic.
Yes. And then they refinance into a long-term loan once a property is rented. So it's all through this same bank.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So they've been great to work with. It's one of the products that they commonly use in this area. It's a local bank. They're used to working with investors, and that's how they do it. Or one of the things that they do. So that's how we were doing that. Now the key, because since we do everything through our business, we don't have anything personally owned. It's all business. Our interest rates are higher because of that. So in order to make that work, we have to find a good enough deal to make that work. In order for the rent, for it to cash flow, really, basically. So that's kind of how that falls in as well. So when we're looking at a property, we follow the 75% all in is really most of the time maximum of ARV that we can go in on a property and still fully refinance out with a bank and cash flow. So that's kind of our benchmark. That's most of what we look at. We don't look at appreciation. We don't look at really anything else. It's, will this house pay for itself?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point that you're making there too. Same thing with don't overcomplicate things. We all need to figure out what are the numbers that are important to us for our goals. And then those are the numbers that we need to look at. Same thing like you're kind of mentioning, I'll have people that'll talk about like, you know, start throwing out acronyms, right? COC, ARV, and I'm like, great, but what is a cash flow? To me, that's the number that I'm looking for, right? Like I can understand how much money I need to put into a deal, just like how you have your system and your flow that really works in your situation. Same thing. I have kind of my flow that I work with. And to me, you have to look for the number that's most important for you. So that way, when you're analyzing deals, you can make sure to know, is this like a win or a no based on that number that you personally are really looking for. You know, my strategy tends to be more of the buy and holds. I don't really do the renovations that much. That's not really my world. So like to me, looking like when I see ARV, I'm like, nope, don't need that. Like that's not, you know, like we're not even.
Hey, I would love to buy turnkey properties. I would love it, but unfortunately, those do not cash flow with the type of financing we have. So. Unless it's just a screaming deal, which those don't exist. So
I was gonna say, which are clearly sitting around, you know, just waiting for people to pick them up. If they just put a sign that just like that money sign, if they could just put that on the front of a house so we would all know that it was a cash cow, that would be much easier.
I'd prefer they just call me directly.
Oh, okay.
That way nobody else knows.
Well, that's really the problem, right? It's usually that competition. But unfortunately we don't have that, but it isn't. And I like that you pointed out too, that like that you have to make sure that your deal is going to work based on the fact that you're going to have a higher interest rate purchasing through your LLC, or because you don't have those things in your personal names. So that's not something that everybody has to deal with. But what's great about it is that you are still finding deals that make perfect sense that way, but you just have to look at them with a different kind of set of eyeballs here and say, like, I get that question a lot where people will say, oh, with like the interest is like so high if you use a hard money lender, or since I mostly own in New York, people are like, oh, but the taxes are so high. And I'm like, I don't care how much the interest rate is or how much my taxes are, because I'm not actually paying it.
If it pays for itself, who cares?
Who cares? You know, as a New Yorker, our tax bills are absolutely astronomical. But who cares? I'm still able to profit. So it doesn't matter to me if I'm buying $100,000 house or a $500,000 house, as long as I'm getting the cash flow that I expect for the money I'm putting in, we kind of work out there. So I'm glad that you were able to recognize those and make sure to have that working for you. And it's a different process for finding some deals, but you're trying to get to the same end goal there. So I think that's fantastic that you found a way to make it work for yourself. Anything else you would like to share with our listeners about either tips, something that they should make sure to be thinking about when hiring accountants or working with somebody for their bookkeeping, or anything about your real estate journey that you would like to give a piece of advice on to everybody else out there?
Really. Okay. So there's so much accounting information I would love to share in the next, 2 minutes.
And we might have to do a second one of these just on accounting itself. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future. We'll have you back on. But in a 2-minute grand scheme accounting, go for it.
Really the number one thing that I try to impress upon people in regard to talking with an accountant is that with anybody you talk to, everybody is a people too. Like everybody you talk to is a person just like you. Because they have 3 little letters after their name, that does not make them any smarter than you. I know quite a few accountants that I wonder how they pass that test.
And let's also throw in anybody that has those 2 little letters after their name in addition to those 3, right? 3 letters, 2 letters, it does not matter.
Any letters after your name.
Any of those letters after your name does not make you above.
It just means that they have a different skill set than you. And you can learn why it's important from them. If you go and talk to an accountant and they can't explain to you why it's important, what they do for you, why it's important, then really you might need to find a new accountant. But also, like, don't feel dumb I have people all the time that apologize because they feel so dumb talking to me.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's because I've grown up, I've been in this jargon. It's like talking to a doctor when they start speaking, medical ease. I mean, you know what that's like. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Everybody has their own set of acronyms and jargon that they use. And like I said, accounting is a completely different language. So when you're talking to an accountant, don't feel dumb. If anything, they should be able to teach you so that you can understand. And if you have questions, that is totally okay. I love questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just say, go talk to somebody else, because I don't know. So, so it's totally okay not to know and to ask questions and really look dumb. You don't look dumb. Your skill set is something else, and that is okay.
Yeah. Once again, if someone was, I'm just going to pick something random here. If, a mechanic came to you and was asking you questions, like, I can see them definitely saying like, oh, I feel dumb asking you questions. But your response might be, well, I have no idea how you drove here. Like, I don't know how the car works that got you here.
Exactly.
That's your specialty. This just happens to be mine. And I do agree with you that we need to start looking this as opportunities to learn rather than an opportunity to be hard on ourselves. And to really beat ourselves up being like, this is something I don't know. And I really hope that for a lot of the ladies out there that are listening, like lady landlords, that's kind of the part of the group here is let's get that education. Let's kind of get those foundations of that information.
And I love that.
So we can go out and learn.
Lady landlords.
Thank you so much. But that's the idea, right? Let's be confident. So that way, when we go out to the world, we can talk about those things and not have to apologize. And we as women specifically, we tend to start a lot of sentences with, I'm sorry, but. And we need to start changing that up into to clarify so I can learn, to make sure I'm understanding this. Like we need to start using these in words that are showing that this is a skill set I would like to learn about. Not saying we have to know everything. I don't want to be a CPA. That is not my goal, but I want to be able to learn enough that I can have a conversation with my CPA in an intelligent manner to make sure that I am doing the best I can for my business, i.e. my real estate investments.
Yes.
So that's a great point. Thank you, Grace. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate having you on and being one of our member spotlights. So thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.